Today I'm showing you exactly how Hollywood lost hundreds of millions in the dumbest ways possible back in the 80s, including a movie where Bill Murray disappeared for 4 years after it bombed. Let's start with the first box office disaster. This movie was supposed to launch a trilogy, but instead Indiana Jones buried it forever. So after 48 Hours hit big, Universal handed Walter Hill a pile of money, almost $15 million bucks, to make whatever wild thing he wanted next. What he gave them was Streets of Fire. This is some sort of a rock and roll mercenary story. A guy saving his pop star ex from a biker gang led by Willem Dafoe in vinyl overalls. The whole thing plays out in this neon alternate universe 1950s. Think 50s cars, 80s music, all mashed together on a massive city set they built right on Universal's backlot. The plan was even bigger. Universal wanted this to be the first in a trilogy, but then for some reason they decided to release this movie just 2 weeks after Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Predictably, it got steamrolled. $8 million at the box office, and that was it. Any talk of sequels vanished. Universal tried to pin the blame on acting, but behind closed doors, nobody at the studio had any idea what to do with it. How do you even market this crazy rock opera mashup with no big stars? So the movie basically disappeared. Fun fact though, the guy who designed the sets, John Vallone, actually designed rides at Disneyland. That's probably why some of the movie's sets ended up looking like some kind of dystopian theme park. Bill Murray was riding high after years of comedy, but he always wanted to do something more serious. The only way Columbia got him to sign on to Ghostbusters was by agreeing to make The Razor's Edge. This was actually his passion project, based on the Somerset Maugham novel. The studio figured it'd be fast and cheap, but the shoot ballooned. Filming on location in India and France, budgets shot up to $13 million, and nobody had a clue how to sell this thing to the public. Murray's comedy fans showed up expecting laughs. What they got instead was a heavy drama about a shell-shocked World War I vet searching for some spiritual meaning. Nobody was ready for that. The movie flopped hard. People openly laughed at scenes meant to be serious. Critics didn't hold back too. Variety straight up said Murray was all wrong for the role. And Murray took it hard. He quit Hollywood for 4 years, moved to Paris, basically went off the grid. Even spent some time studying philosophy. For Columbia, though, it was just a blip. Ghostbusters came out the same year, made nearly $300 million, so The Razor's Edge was just chalked up as an acceptable loss. Buckaroo Banzai is what happens when a studio tries to force a cult classic from scratch. 20th Century Fox put $17 million into this crazy sci-fi mashup. Peter Weller plays a brain surgeon rock star comic book hero fighting aliens from another dimension. And the script here is intentionally weird, full of in-jokes and references to fake lore. They really wanted that franchise. There was a sequel even teased at the end credits. Buckaroo Banzai against the World Crime League. But the studio had no idea how to market it. Fox barely put out enough prints, never gave it a real wide release, and the movie went straight into the ground at the box office, just $6.3 million in the US. That was it for the series, and that was it for director W.D. Richter's shot at studio filmmaking. But Buckaroo Banzai didn't die. VHS, midnight screenings, and word of mouth turned it into a cult staple. Kevin Smith spent years trying to turn it into a TV series, but the rights are a legal nightmare. Even now, the film still got that late-night crowd who see it as a classic. Megaforce is one of those disasters where you almost admire how completely it falls apart. The plan was simple. Launch a whole action franchise with Barry Bostwick leading this futuristic international squad rolling around in high-tech motorcycles and weaponized dune buggies. Everything looked flashy, at least on the poster. On set, most of the high-tech vehicles barely worked. There's even a motorcycle stunt that failed so badly they had to animate it later with cheap visual effects. You can literally see the switch from real footage to a cartoon bike in the middle of the big moment. Hal Needham directed, fresh off Smokey and the Bandit. He could handle car chases, but effects were clearly not his thing. The production burned through money on custom-painted suits and vehicles, half of which fell apart during filming. Mattel planned a big toy line for the movie, but once they saw the early footage, they bailed immediately. It was just that bad. And to make things even worse, they released Megaforce right in the middle of summer 1982, up against E.T. and Blade Runner. It made just $5.7 million at the US box office, not even enough to pay off the vehicle budget. The whole franchise idea died on impact. Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman as clueless lounge singers who wind up in a CIA mess in Morocco. The original script here was tight, funny, and everyone thought it would be a hit. Then the stars got involved. Beatty and Hoffman spent the entire shoot trying to one-up each other, cranking out take after take, sometimes 40 or more for a single scene. Director Elaine May completely lost the handle on production. They shot on location in the Sahara, and the spending got absurd, like $12,000 a day just for ice, for example. Columbia Pictures figured star power would just cover everything and drop $20 million on marketing. That opening weekend, they got barely $4 million. Critics destroyed Ishtar. David Denby called it the biggest fiasco in film history. Beatty blamed new studio management, said they sabotaged him. But it didn't matter. Internationally, nobody showed up. Total box office was just $14.4 million against a $51 million budget. Completely dead. After The Deer Hunter, Michael Cimino could do whatever he wanted. So United Artists basically gave him the blank check and let him go wild with Heaven's Gate, a huge western set around Wyoming's Johnson County War. Cimino brought in Christopher Walken and Chris Christopherson and got to work. And then the whole thing spun out of control. The original budget was $11 million, but Cimino wanted authentic, so he built a western town from scratch, tore it down, rebuilt it again, just because he didn't like the look. Days of shooting went by with barely a minute of usable footage. He ended up with 1.3 million feet of film, and when he finished the first cut, it ran 5.5 hours. Critics hammered it right out of the gate. The New York Times called it an unqualified disaster. So, of course, United Artists freaked out, pulled the film from theaters, and tried chopping it down to a 2.5-hour cut for a re-release, but nobody showed up. Total box office was just $3.5 million against a $44 million budget, which at the time was just unthinkable. And as we all know, Heaven's Gate didn't just flop, of course, it killed United Artists. The studio literally went bankrupt and got sold to MGM. Columbia Pictures originally put up $23 million for this one, but Terry Gilliam, true to form, lost the plot and let the production balloon out to $46 million. Gilliam's vision was just pure insanity on screen. Flying ships, trips to the moon, Robin Williams as a floating head. Everything that could go wrong did here. Strikes, bad weather, actors dropping out. Producers even raised extra money behind Columbia's back just to keep the movie from being shut down. But by the end, Columbia had new management who wanted nothing to do with the project. They dumped it in about 100 theaters, gave it no push, and that was that. The film only brought in $8.1 million. Robin Williams hated the shoot so much he refused to put his name on it and is credited under a fake name. Munchausen still grabbed 4 Oscar nominations for costumes and art direction, but it left Gilliam's career in shambles. He said later that the movie made him lose everything except his house. This is one of the most shameless movies ever made. This is a movie that exists for one reason only: to sell Coke and McDonald's. A kid in a wheelchair befriends a weird-looking alien stuck on Earth, and together they spend the whole runtime dodging NASA agents and trying to get the alien back to his family. That's the setup. But the real star here is product placement. These two basically live on Coca-Cola and hang out at McDonald's. There's even a full-blown dance sequence in the middle of a McDonald's. The financing tells you everything here. Private investors tied directly to McDonald's, and Coca-Cola put up all the money. The plan was obvious, but the critics saw through it immediately. Everyone called it out as a feature-length McDonald's commercial, and even McDonald's corporate ran for cover. They distanced themselves from it as soon as the reviews hit. Financially, it was a train wreck. Budget was $13 million and US box office just $6.4 million. That didn't even cover the ad campaign. The movie just disappeared, gone from theaters before anyone noticed. Nobody involved with the movie ever recovered from it. Jade Caligari, the kid in the wheelchair, never acted again. The film just nuked everybody's career. This is one of the strangest, most misguided movie projects of all time. A massive Korean War epic with Laurence Olivier playing General MacArthur. The whole thing was bankrolled by the Unification Church. They poured $30 million in, hoping for a mix of pro-MacArthur propaganda and subtle religious messaging. They shot in South Korea, and it was a disaster from day one. Equipment literally sank into mud. Actors refused to come back for reshoots. Olivier was apparently drunk for most of the shoot. What started as a $30 million project ballooned up to $46 million. Insane money for the time, one of the most expensive movies ever. When it finally made it to theaters, MGM didn't even bother pretending it was a big deal. They just dumped it out there, and it barely brought in $5.2 million. Critics annihilated it. Roger Ebert called it the most expensive B-movie ever made. The Unification Church was so embarrassed they started buying back prints, just trying to make it disappear. For a while, the movie was basically lost.